for the last, almost few years, he's joined ComplyAdvantage. He's been responsible for targeting different personas in different sectors, from fintech right up to tier 1 banking. Getting and navigating the banks is very difficult because they're very difficult human beings, if you can call them that. So the highlight is actually in 2019 he was nominated in the industry as being the 6th top SDR in the UK. He also followed up, and tonight he's got 7 minutes to inspire you to focus on the little wins. And it's Tom Little! Round of applause. Good luck, mate. Is that the mic?
I think I've got to use that one.
Oh, you have to use
that
one.
Got that one. Cool, thanks James. So I'm going to jump into my talk in a minute, but before I do, I want to give a quick introduction to ComplyAdvantage. So we use our specialisms in data and tech to fight financial crime, whether that's money laundering, bribery or corruption. We have a global database of people and companies. So basically, if you've opened an account with a payments company or a bank, it's likely it's been checked by us or something similar. If you'd like to find out a bit more about what we do, then come find one of the team afterwards. So tonight I want to talk about, the title of my talk is the importance of focusing on the little wins along the way to success. So I want to draw upon some of my experiences at ComplyAdvantage. So but before that, before I joined, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. All I knew is that I wanted to make a lot of money, get those big commission checks and basically be a deal closer. I was kind of interested in fintech, financial technology, so I'd go to these industry events but not really know what was going on, but I knew that my next step was going to be something that I was going to put 110% into. I fell into the wonderful world of regulatory technology, selling to compliance officers somehow at ComplyAdvantage, and I came through the door basically supercharged motivation, really keen to learn and impress. I joined alongside someone else that was going to be a BD into a team of AEs, and there was no BDs in this team because they'd actually been promoted already to AEs. So that was, for me, that was the path that was already trodden. That was the carrot that was being dangled in front of me, right? That was the motivation. I came through the door thinking, right, I just want to do everything I can to be an AE as fast as possible. So a couple of months went by, did the onboarding process, etc., and I started to realise that it's pretty complex here what we do, and we've got a number of products across data and technology. As I said, we're selling to compliance people that are like naturally risk averse. There's different regulations across different sectors, different regions, and as James mentioned, like you could be selling to a guy that's like started up a cryptocurrency firm or selling to a C-level executive of a tier 1 bank. So there was a lot to learn. And it basically put me in this kind of a bit of a panic mode where I started to focus more on the theory rather than the practical, thinking that, right, if I'm going to engage with this wise old chief compliance officer, I'm going to need to know this and this to actually gain his trust, etc. So what it meant was I was like subscribing to articles coming through and reading them, reading as much as possible, reading like competitor analysis reports. Literally, like it got down to like article. Paragraph 20 of Article 4 of some regulation, and it got pretty ridiculous. So the result of that was I was 40% of my target once I'd ramped up, and I was pretty worried about it because like I'd settled into a company where it was really great to work here, like I'd made lots of friends, etc., like really fast growing company, but as we all know in sales, you're only as good as your number. So I took a good hard look at myself, and the Christmas party that year, I confided in Zach, who's actually here today, and basically said, "Oh, you're like triple my number. Like you're absolutely smashing it. Like what can I do to get up to speed? Because I feel like I'm going to lose my job." And it got to the point where I took a good hard look within and basically realised I needed to change two things. The first one was simplifying the messaging, focusing on the fact that I'm an SDR, I'm not a deal closer, and my responsibility is to generate leads at the top of the sales funnel. Secondly, it was, after that, it was basically start learning by doing and get myself out of that comfort zone so that I can kind of fail forward, as they say, and then get feedback from there. So an experience that I had that relates to that first point is when I was working with a particular AE, and we booked a room and we were smashing through some cold calls, a bit of a power hour, and he did this call, and once he'd got permission from the prospect to actually, to actually have a minute of their time, this is all that he said. He said, "We're the fastest growing RegTech company in the world. We're working with most of your competitors, and I'm calling you to book a meeting with you." Now, I know that there's different opinions about, how much you should pitch and whatnot, and that might not be the best approach, but that actually taught me that the message should just be simplified, and people basically appreciate you just getting to the point. And as an SDR, your job is, can often come down to selling time, selling that first meeting. So I started to do that myself. I started to really start booking those meetings. My calendar started to populate in the next few weeks, and I'd see some interesting meetings where I'd actually be able to go to them and listen to the AE running through that first discovery call. So that basically brings me on to my second point. Once I'd had a few weeks of listening to those discovery calls, there was one in particular where the AE was off sick, and he said, "Mate, yeah, go ahead, just run that discovery call, like no worries." So I jumped into it, thinking, what's the worst that could happen? And basically the worst did happen. There were three senior decision makers in the call. They'd forwarded on the invite without me actually seeing the invite being forwarded, so I didn't realise. I thought it was a one-on-one. And they just grilled me. It was an interrogation for an hour. They were doing all the discovery questions. I was just backed up against the wall, trying to pitch my way out of something. And I finished the call. My confidence was at kind of rock bottom, but I realised on reflection that actually I had something there which I didn't have before, which was like a real live call recording to listen to, so I could leverage the knowledge of my AEs and my direct manager to actually listen to the call, get their feedback, and then when I would go into the next one, I'd be able to really implement that feedback and then make incremental improvements and basically make those little wins that are needed to get to the great success. So I guess what I'm trying to say is basically a lot of us here are at the beginning of our sales career, and most of us probably are going to want to move to an AE role. So we shouldn't really let the fact that we're on the beginning of that huge learning curve define how much credit we give ourselves along the way. If you have booked a meeting with your target account, then that should be celebrated, right? If you've had your best month to date, then that should be celebrated. Just because the CEO is patting the back of your multi-million pound top salesperson doesn't mean that you can't give yourself credit for achieving things within your role. So yeah, hopefully there's been a couple of takeaways tonight, and I guess great things are just a series of small things done really well. So, cheers.